So reading from Silence Speaks, Stages of Progress, Powerlessness. Man is powerless. The genuine feeling of powerlessness in the true sense is itself of a power. Let us examine the two words power and powerless in respect of their sound when uttered. In the word power, the pitch of the sound is raised at one point and is consequently shorter, while in the word powerless, it is at two places, that is in the beginning and at the end. This brings us to the conclusion that the word powerless has a double force. Let us now take up the word powerful as well. It also sounds high, being composed of three syllables, two of which have an equal force, which is similar to powerless. The similar forces put in together act in opposition to each other, effecting repulsion. Hence, the action becomes ineffective. The word powerless is generally applied to God, the center, which has really no power in itself. Powerlessness includes in itself the idea of power, which is there in a stagnant state, just as it is at the center. Now, the center is known to be the source of all power. What that means, that means that the stagnant or static state, interpreted as powerlessness, is the real originator of power. To sum up in a word, energy in action is power, while in stagnant or static state, it is powerless. Thus, we arrive at the conclusion that powerlessness is the root or the source of power, or in a sense, the greatest unlimited power in itself. If somehow one is able to stop the outer action, or in other words, the outflow of power, it gets balanced and consequently becomes most effective. I want you all to acquire absorbency in that ultimate state, stagnant at the base, but active at will. But that can be possible only when one's individual mind gets properly regulated and balanced, having negativated one's own will altogether. What remains in him then is nothing but nothing. I'll give a pause here to reflect.
Actually, the basic, what I could understand is that Master is asking us to withdraw ourselves from and rather shatter the network and focus towards the base, which will be helpful to us and which will take care. The more emphasis should be there and the attachment to the base there. So probably he is insisting indirectly and constantly. And that is the base where the powerlessness is there. And when we constantly do the constant remembrance and remember the silence or the negated state, that will help us in our sadhana. That's the way I can contemplate this point.
So I understand there's a negation of self is something that will make you more and more powerless. And most people would not want that, right? Most people would want to be powerful. But as he mentions here, powerful, try to explain that there are 3 syllables, and becoming powerful is more like, it's not as effective as becoming powerless, because our goal is the ultimate, and that is not in a state of action, so to say, right? So it's like potentiality. So for us to be in that state, we have to negativate our own will. That is what he says in this last sentence, that our individual mind has to get regulated and balanced, having negativated one's own will altogether. So yeah, what you said is right in a way. Our creation, we will have to shatter, and then what remains is his creation. So in simple terms, like our possession, our attachments, our idea of self, our ego, everything has to go. And that powerless state is what brings us closer and closer to the state of ultimate. That is what I understood. Okay, we'll read ahead. Gods and deities. Regarding gods and deities, I may say that the devas die and are reborn, taking up our form, while we die and become devas. It goes to mean that they too are not free from the entanglements of birth and death. Thus, worship of the devas can never lead one out of the entanglements of births and deaths. To be outspoken, I may as well say that gods are in fact at our service and not we at theirs. With due regard to this fact, let one decide for himself how far these gods can be of avail to us in our pursuit of realization. When they themselves are craving for it, with due regard to this fact, let one decide for himself how far these gods can be of avail to us in our pursuit of realization when they themselves are craving for it. Had the service of gods been sufficient for the purpose, one would never have looked for other means. It is therefore necessary for one thirsting for realization to discover proper means for quenching his thirst. God is one alone. God is one and one alone. So we must take up the one to realize the one alone. The idea of Trinity will definitely lead you to multiplicity, whereby the object shall be lost. One may, however, adhere to the worship of gods so long as proper means are not within his sight. But when he discovers the right course, he must give them up for the better and higher one and take up the direct way to the realization of the absolute. I think this is fairly clear. Babuji Maharaj has said this in the Hindi talk Sina Basina also, that gods are functionaries of nature and they are actually at our service. and it is not wise to pray to gods if one is a seeker of liberation. And here he puts it explicitly that even they are not free from rebirths. So anyone who is not free from rebirth will not be in a position to help us in our goal. Okay. Anyone wants to add anything or any questions? We'll move ahead of that.
Sir, who are gods in this? Gods meant who are all gods? He refers to.
So we have, my understanding is we have the god of rains, and Hinduism has allowed worship of nature in different forms, right? So they are functionaries of nature, right? So those are referred to as gods.
Okay.
Varuna and all these are referred to as gods, right?
Okay.
So I mean, our history is replete with worship of several gods and deities.
Creator.
Not the creator, the expressions of divine in different form, right?
Okay.
So my understanding is when you worship them, they are not in a position, they are functionaries of nature. So they are given some charge of some part of nature, but they are not worthy of worship if you are seeking liberation, because they themselves are not free from it, free from rebirth.
Okay. Thank you.
I think here the context is more the ritual worship that is done to so many gods.
Okay.
Like if you want to seek liberation, then we have to seek the one absolute.
Thank you. Thank you.
But he does add one line here, if you see. One may, however, adhere to the worship of gods so long as proper means are not within his sight. But when he discovers the right course, he must give them up for the better and higher one, and take up the direct way to the realization of the absolute. So we have also come from so much of background which our religion and culture has provided, right? But many abhyasis who tend to continue older form of worships, I think this is directed towards them that those worships will not lead you anywhere. Now that we have found the right course, we must give up those forms of worship for the higher one.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Learned teachers of religion generally induce people to worship gods and deities, but that will never be the case with a practical man who has experienced things for himself. The learned have only read the books, while a practical man has tasted the spirit of the books. There is thus a vast difference between them. He alone who has traveled on the path up to the final point can guide others successfully. The learned teachers are more like signposts by the roadside to tell you where the road leads to. This is all the purpose they can serve. It shall no doubt be very strange for one aiming at freedom from materiality to fall upon material forms and grosser concepts. Definitely, the devas can never lead you up to sublimation, which they themselves are lacking in. You have to end even your subtle existence. Whereas by such means, as referred to in the beginning, you are strengthening your material existence all the more, which in other words means spiritual death. inspiration. Now, whether inspiration comes from the divine store Bhandar or the base or from any other level seems to be a vague question. If in reply, I, in my turn, ask you from which layer you draw air for your breathing, you will not be able to answer it precisely. In fact, a complete answer to this question may cover whole philosophy of our system. In a word, I may say that the drawing of inspiration, whether from the base or from any other level, depends upon the personal capacity of the aspirant, which can truly be judged only through practical observation. Perhaps the Vedas might offer some clue to it, but the numerous commentaries and interpretations put forth by men of learning have complicated things so hopelessly that it becomes very difficult to arrive at any definite conclusion. Consequently, the final solution remains to be discovered. As a matter of fact, it is only the life of practical effort that is required for a successful solution of the problem. Unfortunately, people go on suggesting solutions without being able to achieve any. Perhaps nothing can be greater absurdity than this. Bhandar. The word Bhandar or storehouse implies a sense of vastness. It covers the entire godly sphere, including the center and the invisible motions. It is very difficult to have a correct view of it. Every minutest particle comprises all the different layers or circles that exist in the whole universe from one end to the other. Thus, each particle has the same properties as the whole. Hence, every particle can offer the same impulse as the main Bhandar. But that does not mean that since the same particles exist in a stone, the idol made of stone can also be effective in the same way. The fact is that one who has attained a close synonymity with the atom can alone be capable of drawing inspiration from a particle. Activity, of course, serves for a medium of divine grace. Activity, of course, serves for a medium for divine grace. If activity resumes its absolute state, the impulse drawn from it will also be of the purest and finest nature. When one secures expansion in it, his thought force makes further headway towards potentiality. If, however, the aspirant still maintains his flight onwards, he goes beyond potentiality and acquires the state of Jivan Moksha. If the impulse is coming through the medium of a highly elevated soul, it will be real in the strictest sense of the word, because every particle of his being, having merged in the final condition, must have attained the absolute state. It also happens sometimes that an Abhyasi receives grace direct, but it is mostly so when the master with whom he has connected all the channels of his heart gets induced to it by the effect of the jerk offered by the Abhyasi's thought. The jerk comes by itself through the effect of the love and devotion he bears for his master. If an Abhyasi gets completely merged in the master, everything coming to the master gets automatically transferred to the Abhyasi. The merging in the master is therefore of highest value, and the most effective means for attaining it is negation. Jivan Moksha and Videha Moksha. The terms Jivan Moksha and Videha Moksha are usually applied in several different senses. Tulsidas, the author of the Ramayana, uses the word Videha in reference to Raja Janak. But it was only the family surname and had no bearing on his spiritual attainments. The two words refer to particular spiritual states which are much alike. Jivan Moksha refers to the state when one is free from body consciousness. When this condition advances towards maturity, it is then termed as Videha Moksha.
Okay.
Liberation. Liberation has today become very easy because of the presence of the divine personality. The conception of people does not generally go up beyond the point of liberation, which they take to be the final limit of human approach. But that is a wrong idea. As a matter of fact, liberation is the lowest attainment on the divine path. Hence, it is just like a toy for a child to play with. Beyond that, there is yet a lot to be achieved. The infinite ocean lies still ahead. It is a limitless expanse. Have your eyes fixed upon that and only that, and go on and on to trace it out. I have a heart ever ready to help anyone who might be in need of help. I take the job not as a master, but only as a humble servant of humanity. There are and have been masterly gurus who work and have worked as masters in their time, but I prefer to be a servant instead, and to work as a servant for the good of the people in general. Please do what you are told to do and keep me informed of your day-to-day progress and also of the difficulties, if any. I may assure you that you can achieve the goal very easily if you go on persistently with constant remembrance. Here he is stressing that liberation should be the minimum goal, but there lies much beyond. He also says it at other places that liberation is the minimum rung in the spiritual ladder. Moksha. Moksha is commonly presumed to be the final point of most religious pursuits. But moksha may be represented in two ways, as salvation and as liberation. Salvation refers to a state of temporary pause in the normal routine of birth and death. This temporary suspension of the normal routine may, in different cases, extend to different lengths of time according to one's attainment. During that period, the soul enjoys freedom from rebirth. But after the expiry of that period, it returns again into the world to assume a material form. But in the case of liberation, when once it has been achieved, there remains no possibility of the soul's return to the material form. Liberation is literally the end of the routine of births and rebirths. We will stop here. Does anyone want to add any final thoughts or any question or clarification? This is also given in Reality at Dawn, where he explains salvation and liberation. And tradition has held moksha as the highest goal. But Babuji Maharaj just talks about freedom from rebirth as the minimum objective one should have. But our goal should be higher. So when he says here, have your eyes fixed upon that and only that, and go on and on to trace it out. And he assures the help as a servant of humanity.
So the salvation and liberation cannot be said to be alternate words. Each has different meaning.
Yes.
Liberation is a permanent solution of getting out of life cycle, whereas salvation is a temporary
Temporary pause in the cycle of.
Temporary cycle of births.
Yes.
So a liberated soul will not come back to take a birth again.
Correct. In the material form. The soul will not be born in the material form. The soul is liberated. Whereas in salvation, after a certain time period, you will enjoy freedom for that time period, but then come back. So that is why the minimum goal should be liberation.
Right, sir.
Okay, so we will end here. Just wanted to share one quick thing here, where he mentioned Jivan Moksha and Videha Moksha, and then they are very similar, except that Jivan Moksha refers to a state where one is free from the body consciousness, and the maturity of that condition, it is termed as Videha Moksha. So there is a Satyapadam that will come, Deepavali issue. I think it will be posted either today or tomorrow. Hard copies will also come. In that, Babuji Maharaj has written a letter to an Abhyasi. Actually, it is a response to a letter from an Abhyasi from Tinsukia, where he explains body consciousness and soul consciousness. And relating that is like when you go beyond the body consciousness and go beyond the soul consciousness also, then we are closest to a high condition. So if when that article gets published, do read it. It's not published in any of the publications earlier. It's translated from Hindi. So there he explains body consciousness and soul consciousness. And when he mentions that awareness is not felt in higher conditions, why that is a good thing. That is what he explains in that article. Okay, so we will read from Koshas in the next session.